with your hosts, Joe Bob.
You're awful.
And AJ Applegarth.
It's Sin Shu Chu. It's a mouthful.
All right, welcome to the Fantasy Six Pack Hour. My name is Joe Bond, founder of FantasySixPack.net. With me, as always, AJ Applegarth. What's going on, man?
Not too much. Ready
Wearing your Scott Fishbowl 9 shirt. Just, I don't know which one was better or worse for you, Fishbowl 9 or Fishbowl 10. You've had a rough go of it, man.
At this point, I would say 10 is worse than 9. I have yet to win in 10. I think I had maybe 1 or 2 in 9. So
at least it wasn't your fault. 9, like your quarterbacks decided to bite the dust. 1 before the season started, 2 first week. So
yeah,
pretty crap luck there for you last year. Then this year, just it's not working out for you. So all right, man. So we've got a good show tonight. But before we get going, want to remind everybody to subscribe, follow us wherever you listen or watch, YouTube, Periscope, iTunes, Spotify, you name it. Go ahead and do that. We appreciate the support. Right now, we've got Falcons and Panthers. And, of course, as soon as I look over, it's a commercial break. I want to say it's 14-6 Panthers. Curtis Samuel has scored twice. Matt Ryan has thrown the ball a lot to Julio. Yet they have not scored. They've gotten 2 field goals. So bye week teams this week: Washington football team, Arizona Cardinals, Jacksonville Jaguars, and Houston Texans. All right, we're gonna bring on our guest first before we do beer of the week, and it is Chris Allen, contributor for 4 for 4, number fire, DLF football, or DL football. I guess that's what it is. Yeah, I read that wrong. Chris is second time on the show, man. Welcome back. Glad to have you.
Gentlemen, I mean, I feel like it's been forever since we've gotten a chance to sit down. It feels like it just because, I mean, we're 8 weeks into the season, and I mean, it feels like forever to me, to be quite honest. I can't remember half the stuff that happened in week 1, to be quite honest. So any discussions we had during the off season, just forget about it. But I'm happy to be talking with y'all tonight. And I mean, we got some football on right now, but I mean, let's get into whatever we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So tonight we're going to be getting into some ADP review and talk about a little about the Cowboys self-destructing in front of us. And then first, though, our advice. Sorry about that. Let's do our beer of the week. Totally messed that up. We haven't had a guest to do beer of the week in.
Beer.
All right, so Chris, you are the guest. You can go first, man. What you drinking tonight?
So tonight I've got a little concoction of my own. Like we talked quite a bit about the fact that I'm a home brewer. So actually because it's the season, and normally I like to brew ales, hazies, IPAs, things along that line. But since it's, getting into the, back end of the year, I have actually a chocolate peanut butter porter that I need to keg up within the next couple of days. And then tonight I'm drinking a pumpkin ale. And for this brew, so it's just the base is like a typical like ale, so with a little bit of maltiness flavor and whatnot. But I actually take legit like pumpkin meat, put that in the oven with some brown sugar on top of that, and then that's what actually goes into the boil. So you get like legitimate pumpkin flavor. I add in a little bit of cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice with a little bit of vanilla flavoring like on the back end. So it really does have that, it looks like, a general, ale that you would pick up, brown ale, something along those lines, but it has the nose, aroma, and flavor of like a pumpkin pie.
Nice.
Wow,
sounds
man,
delicious.
That
send some out to Maryland. We'll let you know how it is.
Yeah, I kegged this up and force carbed on, and so today's Thursday. I think I did it on either Sunday or Monday, and so I just let it kind of condition for about a day or so. And I mean, Head retention isn't exactly where I'd want it at because you can see it's like, not really, it's not as great as I had hoped it would be. But I assume that's because of all the oils and stuff from putting the pumpkin and like all the extra additives and stuff to it. But regardless, I mean, yeah, it's good stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, dude, that's a lot of work that I would not do. So kudos to you, man, for doing all that.
I appreciate it.
AJ, what you got, man?
I'm drinking one I've seen in the beer store a couple of times and just ended up not getting it until last night. I decided why not. It's a Trogs Independent Brewing Jovial. It's the Belgian style double ale, 7.5%. It's a 12.7 weird shaped thick brown bottle. So it's good though. First time I've had it, and I will definitely be enjoying it throughout the show.
Cool. So I am drinking an Aslan beer company. DM it to my inbox is a triple dry hop double IPA. 8.4%. It's definitely heavy. This one's probably going to be a slow sipper the whole night. It's not a triple IPA, so it's not as like strong as some of the IPAs that I've drank before, but it's definitely on the heavier side. So it's a long one to drink. So hopefully this one lasts me.
Were you drinking something from that brewery the last time I was on?
That's very possible. I do like their stuff. So
okay.
I get a lot of the repeats.
Okay.
I try to change up the actual beer, but I definitely go with a lot of the same breweries because I find what I like and I just stick with it. So I'm actually trying to scroll back to find your show in the notes and see what I had written down because I do keep everything. I'm not gonna find it right now. And Jeff just gave me the worst news ever. Calvin Ridley has a foot injury, and I'm gonna cry.
Man.
That's not good. No.
Well,
Julio season.
Fuck off, man. Shut up, AJ. All right, let's get to our advice column this week. I'm going to be talking a little bit about, how to handle your team depending on your record. Like we get it. There's some teams that are 7-0. There's some teams 6-1. Some teams that are 0-7. I'm gonna start with the bad records first. I get it. It's hard to get motivated to go in and make roster moves and everything else when you're. I hate to say you're out of it, but yeah, you're out of it. Let's be a little realistic here. Whether it's because everybody's just busting on you or you had injuries, which we've had a lot of this year. Whatever the reason, you're probably not going to make the playoffs. If you do, you're going to limp in. It is what it is. So let's just be honest about it. My thing with those teams is at least go in and set your roster. Set your starting lineup every week. You never know. Not that I say you're going to make the playoffs, but you never know. You could literally make a difference for the playoff race. You could be playing on week 13, a team that's in 7th place, trying to make that top 6. And if they win, they're in. If they lose, they're out, right? If you could beat them, that matters. But if you don't try, then you just gave somebody a play. You just changed the whole league to where if this was week 2 and you were trying and you beat them, that's totally not fair. And so I hate the teams that that don't set lineups after a while. Thankfully I'm not in any leagues like that. I used to be in leagues and I used to have to kick out my friends that just gave up after a while. And so I stopped playing in leagues like that because of it. But that's my kind of thing with you. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't about waiver wire and Chris and AJ, feel free to jump in with this. About the waiver wire, if you're out of it, I don't know if I'm going to be the most active person on the waiver wire. I'm not going to be snaking players for teams that are going to be able to use them in the playoffs. But free agents, especially people that are injured, I'm going to at least have a full roster of players to play every week. I don't know. Chris, AJ, you guys have any thoughts on that with like the teams that are kind of out of it at this point?
Yeah, you should always set your roster, and I think to at least stay competitive. I mean, if you don't want to go through the rigmarole of like making like waiver claims and all that like every single week, okay, I can understand that. But for the most part, you should still be competitive throughout the like for the rest of the season. Don't just completely roll over and I guess change the landscape of your league by basically giving your next opponent a free win, because that changes. I mean, that kind of brings the rest of the league down. Yeah. So I think you should at least continue to at least set a roster and all that, and at least just keep the rest of the league, I guess, stable. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like before you just completely change how the playoff race like shapes up for the rest of them.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, you didn't jump in a league to not play the year out. I mean, unless you just have 80 leagues, and I'm close, but I'm still going to be setting. Yeah, I'm still going to be setting all my lineups regardless. And I mean, my teams are kind of mixed bag this year. Some much better than others, but injuries again have hurt me in a lot of teams, and I kind of put a lot of my eggs in the same baskets between my leagues, so I would be able to root for the same people. But that hasn't really worked out for me all season.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, you can't. The only thing I'll add there, though, with the waiver wire, I mean, you can't really forget about it if you're in keeper. But I get the point that you made, Joe, about not wanting to snake players from people that are actually
keepers in dynasty leagues are different. I'm not. Those are different beasts.
I mean,
like,
redraft.
I
Don't
redraft.
really care about
I
it.
think you're
either.
kind of out of that race for the most part. Until that's like a team not in the playoffs taking the number one waiver claim, like taking the best player, like for no reason, like that annoys me. So let's focus on the upper echelon teams, right? Those 7-0, 6-1s. I'll even lump in the 5-2s. You're sitting pretty. You're feeling good about your teams. Now's the time to try to maneuver and make a trade. Maybe, front load your team a little bit. Now's that time. Maybe you want to wait a week till the actual NFL trade deadline goes. That's fine. But now's that time where you want to make sure you actually do make the playoffs. You don't want to tank it. You don't want all of a sudden like nosedive. But now's the time where you're looking to position yourself for the playoff run. That week 14, 15, 16, or hopefully you get a bye week, so just 15 and 16, right? You want to start positioning your team. So do whatever you got to do. Make a trade to get another big name player. Jeff, saw your YouTube comment. Just pat yourself on the back. Get another big name player. Maybe give up a couple depth pieces to a team who's 3-4, 4-3, something like that, right? If I'm one of those bottom feeder teams, I'm not trading at this point because you're just gonna get had at this point. Like you're gonna give up a Julio Jones and get two, middle tier players, and literally is gonna do nothing for your team but just help out that team. So I'm out of it with those teams and trading too. Like you basically just don't want to unbalance the league when you're out of it, is what I always say. And you guys seem to kind of agree with that statement. So, so with those upper echelon teams, I feel like you're trying to set yourself up for the best success in the playoffs at this point. Now the middle tier teams, maybe you do need a little bit more depth to help your lineup out. Maybe you can give up the better player in the trade. Sometimes giving up the better player in the trade isn't always the worst thing. Because look at it, when all is said and done, most points wins. So if you're getting two, good players back, giving up a great player, even if, that great player plus your replacement player might not be better than the 2 you're getting back. So you've got to think about that. Like, everybody just wants to win the trade and not give up the best player. I get it, and that's kind of always like people's MO. But sometimes it works out.
Mhm.
Sometimes you need depth. Sometimes you're just stuck. You're stuck at 4 because you have no second running back. If someone's willing to give you a good second running back in return for, your loaded receiver, you can give up a really good receiver. It's going to help you in the long run. Chris, I'll let you comment. Like, what do you think about those thoughts there?
Well, I think that's definitely the best way, or less the best way to approach trying to like stash like the good players like for those runs. And regardless of who it is, I do think right now, even here in like in week 8, we should be kind of eyeing what those good matchups would be in weeks like 13,
Yes.
14, 15, like somewhere in there. So a couple of things that like I've been doing, because like 4for4 has like these hotspot tools where you can use adjusted fantasy points allowed to various positions, and you can kind of scale it so that instead of just looking at like now, like weeks 8 through 10 or whatever, like in the short term, you can start to look at those matchups. Like, while we don't know a lot about what defensive matchups will look like in about a month or so, I mean, we can at least use the information we have right now to say that, like, let's see, what's a good example? Maybe something like, I think right off the top of my head, if I'm remembering correctly, I think like Chicago. Chicago plays against Houston, Minnesota, and Jacksonville in weeks 14, 15, and 16. Now, if you bought in, or at least you have, if you're under the impression that David Montgomery's workload is decent, while he has been really inefficient with his touches, at least the game environment was set up such that David Montgomery would be a guy that you might be able to peel off of somebody's roster right now. And then if you want to use him for an RB2, if you're playing in a half-point PPR league, possibly a flex play, that would be a...
Times, and he tries to mention it, and I'm 50-50 on it. I never really know which way to go. I want to ask you, what about a guy who's performing phenomenally right now, right? But his end of the year schedule is just straight brutal. Do you trade him and get another piece, or really two really good pieces back, because you don't want to face the Colts and the Broncos, or whoever defenses, right? Like these like stout defenses. Tampa's. You don't want to face these defenses.
Mm-hmm.
Do you subscribe to that as well?
Oh, I definitely do. I mean, but it's all dependent, right, on who you're targeting or who you're going to get in return. And I think that's where I would need to see like what the trade parameters are. But I think generally, if you're going to wind up selling, let's say if you're going to trade away Julio Jones, I'm just throwing it out there since we've got the Falcons game on right now.
Right.
If you're going to trade him away just because their matchups like towards the end of the season, which actually don't look too terribly great, because they're playing against the Chargers in week 14, Tampa Bay in week 15, Kansas City in week 16, which isn't too terribly hateful, but still.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're concerned about it and you want to try and make a move on him, but then who are you going to try and get in return?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not just going to try and find a team that's like any of the guys that I was talking about earlier. You would probably still want to get a wide receiver one back, like in your trade negotiations. So who would be a guy to target? I mean, could you try and get? I'm not necessarily saying that a wide receiver 1-for-1 swap or same position swap is possible, but a decent running back that can maybe fit into that category. Could you break him down for somebody like, at least at this point in time, like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire that people are generally down on, especially with the Le'Veon Bell signing, and then possibly a wide receiver too? Maybe, I don't know. But it's just thinking about what you're going to get, what you can realistically get in return, I think is where you really have to draw the line at trading away some of your best players before you even think about like putting them on the block.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's all about, it's the return big time for sure. You can't just get anybody back who has a good matchup. But it's, but if you're going to get somebody good in return who's also got good matchups in return, for the, obviously, your probably giving away the better overall fantasy player. But like, yeah, bad matchups are bad matchups. So
Yeah.
I get it. So, all right, man. Let's excuse me here. Let's jump into the next topic here, and I wanted to do something fun here, where we're kind of at the halfway point. We've so we've had a lot of injuries, a lot of players kind of not live up to expectations. I wanted to revisit this first couple rounds of ADP here and just kind of rip through it, and then stop and highlight a few guys and ask both of you, what your thoughts on them are going forward and things like that. So a few of them we can't do anything about. So first off, Christian McCaffrey, number 1 overall, obviously got hurt early. Nothing you can do there. It sucks, but it is what it is. Hopefully he returns next week. Saquon, same thing, in a bad offense and wasn't producing when he was in there. Unfortunately, nobody really can there. But then he got hurt, done for the year. What are you going to do? Next guy, Ezekiel Elliott. Number 3 overall. Currently still number 3 for his position, number 19 overall. But, man, the arrow is not looking good for him. I want to ask you guys, and we'll get into the rest of the Cowboys later because I wanted to kind of take a minute on this team and just kind of talk about him. But, Chris, give me your thoughts about Zeke, man. Like, what do owners do with him right now?
Well, I think at this point, if you wind up trading him away, I'm talking about just in redraft situations. Dynasty, it's a completely different story. Given his age, he got the second contract, so on and so forth. But at least from a redraft standpoint, you're trading him away, at bottom dollar. You're more or less moving him essentially on his name value at this point because, the Cowboys offense, they are nothing like what they were in the first 4 weeks of the season, like before Dak went down. Beforehand, they were averaging something along the lines of, I want to say like 450 to 500 yards per offense per week. After that, with Andy Dalton, they're well below 300. Zeke, by himself, he was fine. Because he was one of only 2 running backs in the league that held an 80% running back touch share in his offense, along with a 13 or 15% target share. It was just him and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and that was it. So his profile will always be that of a running back 1 because he's in a condensed offense, at least when it comes to the running back touches. And he, at least for a time, he was a part of a high volume passing offense. He still is. They're just wildly inefficient at this point. So it's hard for me to buy into the notion that, if you're going to trade him away, what, again, the same question I was asking earlier about trading away your good players. Zeke is still on his own, a good player, he's just producing like a good player. So it's what are you realistically going to get back in return?
We literally just had a guy in Fantasy 6-Pack. I don't know. It's another league, but he traded Zeke and got back, I think he said he got back David Johnson. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. Why? Why?
What are you gaining there? I feel like you're not gaining anything. You're giving up the upside of Zeke and getting maybe the safer floor at this point with David Johnson, but no, I'm not doing that.
If you're gonna tell me that if you were going to try and swing for the fences and get again, this is me off the top of my head. If you're gonna try and break down Ezekiel Elliott into trying to think of a running back that might have at least a decent amount of upside. If you wanted to trade Ezekiel Elliott for Austin Eckler plus a wide receiver 2, if that's what if you want to take the gamble that Eckler comes back, he resumes his role. He more or less reduces Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly down to maybe it's a 20-30% running back touch share. He takes the majority of it once he comes back. And then on top of that, I mean, you get a wide, like let's say a mid to high end, like wide receiver too. Okay, I can buy that, because at least then you're buying in on an idea, or at least you're gambling on an idea that could possibly work out. But we've already seen like what we've already seen what David Johnson is and what he's capable of doing in that offense. Like, what excites you? Like, what would excite you about starting David Johnson on a weekly basis? I mean, I don't understand that. So, I mean, for me, I mean, that's where, again, it's more about the process of like what you're going to wind up getting back. And if you want to take that gamble on a guy that's injured, like even if it was like a few weeks ago, and you wanted to trade away, if you wanted to trade away Zeke like immediately after Dak went down, and then you wanted to try and, let's say, get Christian McCaffrey, like the guy that has Christian McCaffrey rostered, he's like sitting at 1-4 or whatever, and he has no hope, and you wanted to make a gamble for that. Okay, I can buy that, because again, you're buying upside. But for a guy like David Johnson, you're not buying upside. There's really no 2-touchdown upside like in David Johnson. I mean, there is 2-touchdown upside in Austin Eckler or any other guys.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, DJ will have his game here and there, but not worth it. So, AJ, any thoughts on Zeke here?
No, I mean, you guys pretty much covered everything there. I just think that teams are going to be too busy keying in on him right now, especially with them on their third string quarterback.
Right. Zero offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, there's still plenty of talent, but I don't see them going anywhere other than trying to feed him the ball. And you might think the matchup's pretty good this week since it's against the Eagles. I mean, I'm sure he'll be okay this week, but moving forward, I don't really want anything to do with Zeke right now.
Yeah, I hear you. So the next guy here, we're going to pause on him too, and it's Alvin Kamara. 4th overall pick. He is 4th overall ranked and number 1 at his position. Chris, man, you were big on him coming into the season. I know you wanted to speak some words on him, so you had the floor. Yeah,
and I think the real reason behind it was a couple of things. Just because based off of ADP, I mean, like best balls like throughout the offseason, it was Christian McCaffrey. It was some order of Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, you can mix and match like most of those guys, but I mean, those were the 3. And then it was Kamara after that, maybe Henry, and then Clyde Edwards-Helaire started getting mixed in shortly after the Damian Williams news. But it was those 3 and then Alvin Kamara in every single case. Yeah. And my argument like against that, even though I mean, at least for me, I had Zeke ahead of both of those guys for the most part, just because I bought into Dallas's offense. But at least looking at Alvin Kamara's workload, like while it wasn't similar, or it wasn't as high in terms of both his rushing share within the offense, because he was still sharing with Latavius Murray, and also his target share. But it was fairly similar also in the red zone, though. I mean, Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, they both had 21 and 19 touches respectively from within the 20-yard line. Alvin Kamara just had 3 less. He just had 16 like within the red zone. I mean, similar workloads also when we're talking about rush share and target share like combined. So it's like he had a similar profile to both of those, but it was because they were, I mean, the offenses were, I mean, Dallas's offense was being hyped up. Christian McCaffrey was the RB1 coming out of 2019. It was difficult for a lot of drafters to justify taking Alvin Kamara over. I mean, throughout most of the season, I mean, after he came back in, I believe, when was that, like week 7 or so, from his, I believe it was like an ankle injury or something along those lines. I mean, you could tell that, I mean, his broken tackle rate after he came back from injury was just almost completely night and day. So if we thought that this offense was still going to be at least one of the, I guess, more efficient offenses in the league with Drew Brees coming back, Michael Thomas He was supposed to be a part of the offense, but he hasn't been since week 1. But regardless, I mean, we still thought that offense was going to be one that could sustain some fantasy success. I mean, if Alvin Kamara was going to be healthy and still a part of the passing game, I thought that there was going to be a path like for him to at least be in the RB1 conversation. Now, injuries aside, I mean, that's typically not the way that you would want his path to be or be a part of his path. But at least, I mean, RB1's like repeating like going back to back, like season after season. I mean, that hasn't happened. I believe all the way going back to, I think it was like 2002, 2003. I think that was the last time an RB1 like repeated like consecutive seasons.
It was like LT,
so,
right?
I believe that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, you go back to, I mean, Tiki Barber, Sean Alexander, like LaDainian Tomlinson, like going all the way back like 03, 04, 05. Like, I mean, any of those guys, I mean, never repeated. So, I mean, even though Christian McCaffrey, we thought he was good, but like,
yeah, I get that argument, and I heard it a ton. I heard it all over the place. You weren't not taking Christian McCaffrey number 1. Like, the amount of work he got in that offense was just unquestioned. And, you know, Barkley was like second there. Zeke, the workload that was there. Kamara was 4th in my book only because you had Drew Brees, you know, supposed to be passing to Michael Thomas a ton, right? And then they added Sanders. Yeah, nobody was expecting huge things out of Sanders, but that was just another guy there. And so, like, that's why Kamara fell to 4. But he's having a phenomenal season, so you know, great for him there. Let's move here on number 5 here was Dalvin Cook, and yeah, you know, he's been good. I mean, he's number 7 at his position. He's missed a week, so you know, you're not happy with him missing the week, but you know, you're gonna take him back. He's supposed to be coming back this week, so you're liking that pick there. Derrick Henry 6. He's number 4 overall. That's an interesting one. He's been very touchdown dependent. The yards haven't quite been there, except for that one obviously monster game. But I mean, if you're a Henry owner, I don't think you're too sad here. Michael Thomas, we're just gonna pass on this one. This is just a total crap show, dude. Like, it's bad.
It's not.
But another receiver that we want to highlight here, Davante Adams, been good when he's on the field. Really good, obviously, except for one like goose egg, basically, and then, you know, he was injured for a couple of weeks. So, Chris, what's your thoughts on Davante Adams? You know, being right in the mix again.
Oh, I mean, he was my wide receiver 1 coming into this season. While I was fine with Michael Thomas, at least from an ADP standpoint, I'd be fine fading Michael Thomas like for a running back, or at least this was like somewhat hot takey. But I mean, if you wanted to draft like Travis Kelce like ahead of Michael Thomas, I wasn't going to fault you for it. I know volatility at tight end and so on and so forth. But at least to avoid Michael Thomas, just because of his lack of downfield targets, where Davante Adams, he's been utilized at all areas of the field, slot, perimeter, short, intermediate, deep targets. And I mean, just looking at his target share, I mean, 34% target share. I mean, I'm not expecting that to maintain throughout the rest of the season. But I mean, he's on pace.
Honestly.
Right. But I mean, I don't think there's really anybody in that offense to challenge him at this point. But I mean, I think with the way that the Packers position themselves in the offseason without investing in this, I mean, the rookie draft class or the rookie wide receiver draft class, and kind of like pigeonholing themselves into like, well, these are the receivers that we're going to be using. I mean, you could see a path to Davante Adams taking over like Michael Thomas. I mean, looking at those two franchises compared, I mean, the Saints went out and they grabbed pass catchers. I mean, this offseason. I mean, that was their thing. I mean, they wanted to make sure that Drew Brees was surrounded. I mean, but the Packers didn't do the same thing. And with Adams, I mean, coming out of 2019 with again like a significantly high like target share, I mean, there was that path. At least it always seemed like fairly clear that was more likely than Michael Thomas, like regardless of injury, staying in front of Davante Adams, even from a target share perspective. I mean, we could argue about the touchdown equity and all that, and maybe from a fantasy perspective, he might have gotten ahead of him, but at least from a target share perspective, I mean, again, I think Adams was always in play to come out ahead of Michael Thomas regardless.
Yeah, I agree with you there on the target share thing, between those two. I basically just put MT in front of Adams just because because of the play of the quarterback, and I didn't expect Rodgers to do what he's doing this year, where he's just like unloading it this year, and it's crazy. So now that Rodgers is just unleashed, it feels like Adams is. If I known that was going to happen, Adams would have clearly been my number one over MT, but so be it. All right, the next guy here, we're going to pause on this guy too, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Helaire. I don't know how to say it anymore because every announcer says it differently. This guy, after Damian Williams went down, his helium just went straight up. Like he was an early pick always. People loved him. But the stock just rose out of control for me, and I wanted nothing to do with him. I thought personally people were buying him at a ceiling cost, and I think Chris, you agree there. So I'm gonna let you speak to that.
Yeah, and this is not to take away from the player. I mean, obviously being drafted in the first round. I mean, 32nd or first. I mean, that draft capital means something. Being drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs, defending Super Bowl champions, and it looks like they're at least definitely on a path to, I mean, I would say divisional round of the playoffs, if not AFC championship game, is probably their floor in terms of expectations for this season. I mean, regardless, I mean, we're talking about an offense where, when he's healthy, Sammy Watkins is their third passing option, in that offense. I mean, Anthony Sherman, linemen are getting touchdown passes in the red zone from that offense. I mean, at any given time, there are 4 or 5 different pass catchers that are viable to get a touchdown in the offense. It is not a condensed offense. So even if Clyde Edwards-Helaire was going to see all of the running back touches, and which, I mean, through the first 4 to 5 weeks, he had that elite profile similar to Ezekiel Elliott. He had an 80 to 85% running back touch share. He had a 13 or 15% or more target share. I mean, he had those things that we would want out of an elite running back one prospect. But again, once they got into scoring position, it could be Tyreek Hill, it could be Travis Kelce, it could be Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson, Anthony Sherman. I mean, the list goes on and on. So if his touchdown equity was always going to be split, and that, I mean, we knew that all the way back in March, February. I mean all the way throughout the offseason, then pushing him up into the first round, regardless of the workload, it did not make sense to me. Because even with the workload, the thing that needs to be a part of their outcomes is a high touchdown equity. I mean, that's what propelled Christian McCaffrey to RB1. It was the workload,
yes,
but also it was the touchdowns. The same thing with Ezekiel Elliott. Definitely the same thing for Derrick Henry. I mean, those were a part of the things that made them the running backs, or I mean, the running back ones that they were this past season. And we could not project that for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, we could project that the offense was going to be good. Nobody was questioning that. But how much of that goodness would CEH get? I never saw it. So trying to draft him at the 106, 107, and something along those lines, it just seemed like a bit too risky. Just given the nature of that offense. And then now with the Le'Veon Bell thing, I mean, all those expectations go right on out the window, man.
I think people were just buying into this offense and just saying, I want the RB1 who seems to be the guy who's going to get all the workload. I mean, AJ, what do you think there?
Yeah, I think the Bell comment is where I was going to go into it.
Oh, yeah. That's obviously changed everything. But
but I mean, I don't think that it's going to cut into CEH's overall scheme and usage for what he's been used for. I think from a running standpoint, Bell is clearly a veteran player. He's been there. He's done plenty of good things on the field for Pittsburgh when he was with them. I still think the whole him sitting out for the full year kind of hurt him overall, but he goes to a team that's, like we just said, Super Bowl contenders easily, is the ceiling. And it's just one more weapon for them to have. And they already have so many as it is. So I think from, CEH's standpoint, I wouldn't be too worried about it unless Bell just comes in there and, destroys it. But he's got to be brought along a little bit slower. He's got to work, into this playbook and learn all of Andy Reid's schemes and everything. So I'm not worried about it now. Towards the end of the season, fantasy playoffs
this week.
That's gonna be. This week I think CH is just gonna be a healthy scratch, and they're just gonna say, "Go for it, John or Bell. Let's see what you can do."
That would be hilarious, actually. Unleash the bell.
Yeah.
It's
going to be a dinner bell. I mean, that's just going to continuously ring in Adam Gase's head for the rest of his.
How many times do we get
life.
like the shot of Le'Veon Bell just glaring at Adam Gase on the sideline?
Yeah,
over under.
It's going to be like this the whole time, looking at the fly that got stuck on
Cat?
Mike Pence's head.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's finish up here with the first round. So Joe Mixon, not a terrible pick, number 10 overall. He's doing okay. He's injured now, but that's a tough blow. But he was all right. Julio Jones obviously had a couple games missed, but he's back with a vengeance. Obviously, and of course with Ridley out now, ankle injury. Looks like he's questionable return. Who knows what's going to happen here? Tyreek. This one actually kind of surprised me. Like Tyrese has been kind of like ho-hum like the whole season. 12th overall on ADP, but 7th in his position. Like, yeah, not living up to the fourth receiver taken, but I mean that's not a bad return on your investment there, really. It kind of shocked me. Like I'm kind of wondering. Like I own Tyreek Hill in one league, and I just feel like the points haven't quite been there, but I guess he's steady enough that he's making it happen. So, yeah. Tyreek owners, you're okay there.
Yeah,
I think so.
I don't. I actually don't own Tyreek in any leagues this year, but I'm okay with that. I mean, again, we just talked about all the different weapons that they have, and he's been good. I mean, he's still the go-to. Him and Kelsey kind of 1A, 1B. But so starting with the second round here, we got Josh Jacobs. He's sitting at 57th overall. I mean, overall, Jacobs pretty much had a big week one. Hasn't really done much since. I mean, that's kind of my thoughts on him. Do either you guys have any input on him? Chris, I'll let you start.
If I'm not mistaken, I think his target share has decreased on a weekly basis the past few weeks. While his I believe also his broken tackle rate has started to drop over the past 2 to 3 weeks as well. But now, I mean, to be fair, I mean, so their last who they played over the last 2 weeks?
Tampa,
so they just played against Tampa,
bye week,
Tampa,
Kansas
City, Buffalo, New England.
Rough schedule.
Yeah, so it's like we have to take that with a grain of thought.
By the way.
Yeah, so we do have to take some of that.
By the way.
Yeah, and so I think for a lot of people in redraft leagues, while I don't take too much, I don't take schedule too much into consideration, but if you again objectively looking at some of the matchups that he had throughout the season, I mean it was kind of easy to see that he was going to have some rough sledding. I mean, if not from a matchups perspective, but just from the simple fact that we could not easily project him for a significant target share within that offense. So I get it. I mean, I still think he's doing well despite all that. But if you were assuming that he was going to wind up, I guess, returning second round value, I mean, it was kind of hard to see that from the jump. Yeah,
that's kind of how I feel on it too. I mean, he wasn't somebody that I was really targeting a lot. It felt like he had a lot of hype coming in. I just wasn't buying into it, and I'm okay with it. I mean, like you said, he's been okay, but not necessarily second round value. Speaking of Miles Sanders, I mean, he's been really good when he's been healthy and on the field, but he hasn't really been on the field enough. And the Eagles are somehow in first place. I don't really get it, but I'm okay with it being an Eagles fan. So thanks for the tie, Cincy. That's gonna be what gets us in the playoffs. But yeah, so I'm okay with that. Austin Eckler, another guy that got bit with the injury bug. Travis Kelce at 16, clearly number one tight end overall right now. That's good. Where you expected him to be. I think everybody is okay with where they drafted him. Nick Chubb was doing really well, even with Kareem Hunt there and getting some carries and getting some more work in the passing game. Both of them have been startable and very serviceable pretty much every week. But now Chubb is injured. Coming in at 18 now, Kenyon Drake. He's 21st and 78 overall. What do we think about Drake here? Chris, go ahead and start.
I mean, just wildly inefficient for most of his starts. I mean, we only really saw him break loose once they were well ahead in their game a couple weeks back, ceding a number of, I guess, high value touches to Chase Edmonds throughout the 2 to 3 weeks prior. So honestly, I mean, and this is probably, I mean, there's always hindsight bias. It's kind of it's basically what we do. We try to figure out, okay, what was it in the past that we could have seen this coming? But I keep thinking back to that picture that surfaced, what was it, in the second or third week of August of him being in a walking boot, and everyone was like, oh, he's cool, he's going to be okay. And after he was starting in week one, nobody else really thought much of it. But now if we look at how he's been used and also his rushing efficiency throughout the first 5 or 6 weeks, I mean, maybe there was something to that. I mean, I didn't see the same level of burst. I mean, this is more qualitative than quantitative at this point, but I didn't see the same level of burst, even on the rushes where he would try and get to the edge. I mean, I wasn't seeing the same runner that we saw last season. So I don't know. I mean, I do think that there's enough production within the offense that once he comes back, he should at least be able to sustain some level of fantasy relevance. But it's pretty clear that if there's not something wrong at this point, then, I mean, Chase Edmonds has taken enough away from him that it's hard to see him getting back to at least, making that, what was the early second round pick. I just don't see him getting back there.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I take away from Drake is that Edmonds has taken all the passing work, and that was Drake's thing. Get him out in space, and maybe you're onto something there with that, ankle or foot or whatever it was. I don't even remember now at this point. Whatever it was that caused him to be in that boot, they clearly don't trust him to be the screen down back, the let's catch it out of the backfield, the sweeps and stuff like that. So they gave all of that to Edmonds, and that was a lot of Drake's value last year. Get him the ball in space and let's let him move. And he made a lot of people a lot of money last year based off of that stuff. So it's unfortunate because I bought into Drake big on this year, and I'm eating it into multiple leagues.
Yeah. Thankfully, he was another guy that I don't own and wasn't really super high on. I mean, I liked what he did last year and was interested if he fell to me at the right spot. But
yeah. Hey, AJ, real quick before you move on to the next guy, I just want to announce Ridley has been announced out for the rest of the game. So, one of my dynasty leagues is done because I'm out Hopkins on a bye week and Ridley out for whatever drink.
Rough go.
Move
Speaking
on.
of rough goes for receivers, Chris Godwin, 19.
Can't stay healthy.
I mean, he's been on and off the field too much for where he was taken. I mean, love the upside. I was a little skeptical about, him and Brady gelling right off the bat, but I figured both of them are very talented. They'd figure it out sooner than later. But again, he hasn't been on the field enough to do it. DeAndre, I mean, he's number one, so he's killing it because of his chemistry with Murray, and this is the DeAndre that we've seen before. So I'm not surprised by this too much. A little surprised to see it happen this quick, but again, him and Murray is just it's a bread and butter combination right now. The next guy we got here is Mr. Jones, Aaron Jones. He is 5th, and then he was 33rd overall. So let's talk a bit about Jones, because I was not a believer in him coming into this season. He was, to me, one of the biggest candidates for regression. Mostly because of all of the touchdowns that he had last year. It was just absurd. And, he was ridiculous last year. But, I feel like this year he's still kind of on that pace. He's only got one game without a touchdown. I mean, 2 if you include last week when he didn't play. So, Chris, what do you think about Jones? Were you in on him this year, or were you passing on him?
Oh, I was definitely in on him. I mean, especially given, it all sounded great in theory, that you could, based off of where he was being drafted at, I mean, you could start with somebody like Ezekiel Elliott and then come back and get an Aaron Jones towards the back end of the second round, and then focus on wide receivers in rounds like 3 through 6, which was like, at least to me, the optimal way to wind up building a team for this season. And yeah, I mean, even if the touchdowns were going to regress, again, I did think it was a condensed enough offense that he would still see a significant number of touchdowns within his offense, regardless of, because I was never a massive believer that that A.J. Dillon was going to wind up completely taking over that backfield. And unless they were going to jettison Jamal Williams during the offseason, I didn't really see him as being a massive factor in how the touch share would be divvied up between the 3 of them, or essentially it's just the 2 of them at this point, because A.J. Dillon has barely gotten involved in the offense at all.
Yeah, when Jones is out.
Yeah, even when Jones is out. So it's more about, do we think that Aaron Jones would wind up being the primary ball carrier? And yes, that's been true, and I think everybody would agree that was going to be true in the offseason. Like, is he going to be was he going to be involved in the passing game? And we talked earlier about the fact that they did not go out and sign any any notable free agents. They didn't draft any wide receivers in the class. So really, I mean, unless you predicted that Robert Tonyan and Jay Sternberger were going to be just these massive parts of the offense, then Aaron Jones was still going to be a part of the passing game. So from a usage standpoint, Aaron Jones, at least from an ADP standpoint, fit everything that you would want, like in a running back, like in the back end of the second round. So even if the touchdowns were going to regress, the way that he was used, to me, suboptimally, at least the way that the offense operated suboptimally, because they were fairly low in terms of neutral passing rate. If that was even if that improved, which it did this season, because I think they're above average in neutral passing rate, I think like 59%. If that improves, then his outlook improves. I mean, basically everybody now becomes a much higher, their value increases because of that. So I think it made sense to me, at least at that point, to just not pass on him. It's either that, or if you weren't going to draft Aaron Jones, then you should definitely be drafting Jamal Williams, which I did a bit of both, like throughout the offseason.
Yeah. Joe, any thoughts on Jones?
No, I mean, like, I thought the regression was going to come with the touchdowns. Just to summarize real quick, I didn't think he would be on this pace again, but he's there. I thought he would still be heavily involved. I wasn't quite sure why he was falling to the back end of the second round like he did. I had him kind of earlier. I had him up there with like the Eckler and the Sanders. I had him mixed in with those guys. So I was taking him earlier than a lot of people were. So I actually have him in a couple places. So I'm happy with him. But unfortunately, the injury came in. Whatever. So yeah.
All right. So moving on, we have George Kittle, number 2 overall, was drafted 2 overall from the tight end position. We knew that was coming. Not a surprise. Kenny Galladay is next. Then we got Patty Mahomes and Allen Robinson rounding out the top 25. So, I like all of those last 3 guys, and I own actually all 3 of them in various leagues. I was really big on Galladay. He missed some time right off the bat there, but him and Stafford have kind of gotten it back together, and they seem to be completely in sync again. Robinson's been a little up and down. Definitely down from what we saw out of him last year. I think that's gonna get back close to where he was now that him and Foles are kind of in a little bit of a rhythm. So any closing thoughts on any of those guys, or should we get into the injuries here?
I mean, if you weren't,
No,
Chris. I love George Kittle. I mean, if there was any case, because I said earlier, I mean, if you want to draft Travis Kelce at like the 107, 108, that's fine. But if you wanted to draft George Kittle ahead of Travis Kelce, I mean, I wasn't going to argue with you, especially back in August. I mean, look at their starting schedule. I mean, for the first 4 weeks, it was against Arizona, the Jets, Giants, and then Philadelphia, and then Miami. I mean, the first 5 weeks of the season, they had just objectively good matchups. And with Deebo Samuel hurt, Ayuk, I mean, a rookie, and I think he wound up being hurt for some of that as well. So It's like their passing game was essentially just going to be George Kittle and then Kendrick Bourne. I think that there was enough, assuming health, the way that the 49ers had structured their passing game, it would have to run through George Kittle.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I thought the targets were going to be there, which, I mean, when he was healthy, they were. So, I mean, I think drafting him was essentially a no-brainer at the end of the first round, early second round. I thought was a no-brainer.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on here real quick. Got a couple quick topics here. Just want to get your quick thoughts. I had a note earlier that I wanted to say about Christian McCaffrey not being activated for this game, which obviously everybody knows now if they're watching. Are we worried at all that he's not going to be activated like next week? This is going to linger a little bit. And then like even when he does return, what's your thoughts on like how involved Mike Davis is going to be? I mean, he's kind of slipped off pace the last couple of weeks, but I mean, Mike Davis has been awesome.
I think the skill is still there. I think I think it was a pass that he caught in the first quarter out of the backfield, like where you could see like the jab step, juke move in order to pick up another 5 or 6 yards. So I definitely still think that the skill is still there. Honestly, though, if I'm not mistaken, Atlanta's run defense has actually not been that bad.
No, it's been pretty good.
Yeah. So like while their secondary is just like hot trash, I mean they still have enough up front that I can understand like why Mike Davis has had a couple of down weeks. But I think overall, I mean, I don't think the team could have asked for much more in a backup, to be quite honest.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Davis, the guy's still only 27. I mean, I feel like he's been in the league for 18
not
years.
A lot of tread on the tires, to be honestly.
He does. I mean, he's kind of been around. He's a bit of a village bicycle when it comes to veteran running backs, but he's still young and he's a bruiser. I mean, he's not a big dude like height wise. He's only 5'9", but he just packs a punch and he just goes after it. So I mean, I like that he's got this opportunity. Obviously, not at the hands of CMC being injured because I own him, but I'm not overly surprised to see what he's been doing. So I do like that.
And then the next topic here, Chris alluded to this earlier. Want to get a little bit more in depth on the Cowboys here, and obviously we know, Dak went down. That's a huge loss. His offensive line is struggling and injured as well. Zach Martin's supposed to come back this week, so that's gonna be a big help for this team. But I mean, they could possibly be playing Ben DiNucci, if I'm getting the name right.
Yep.
I mean, I guess hopefully they get Andy Dalton back, but I'm not really sure that that's something they're wishing for right now because he's been playing, as you like to say, hot trash. So, I mean, what do we do with these guys? I mean, Lamb was like a goose egg last week, basically. Like Gallup was nothing. Cooper was okay. Zeke got like 4 points. It's been bad. What do you do with these guys? Are we just holding them, hoping they bounce back, and then maybe they had like one big game, sell, or like, what's your thoughts?
The same thing with Zeke. I mean, if you're selling them at bottom dollar, and you have to make that choice. If that's something that you want to get out from under them, then okay. But otherwise, I mean, those are guys that you would have to shift to your bench. Hopefully, you're able to pick up. So like for Zeke, you were able to pick up Jamal Williams, Gio Bernard, Boston Scott to kind of, get you through some of these weeks as they figure stuff out. And then, to bridge that gap. And then for wide receivers, I mean, typically there's enough out there on the waiver wire on a weekly basis, unless you're in a fairly deep league, that you should be able to maybe catch lightning in a bottle, like on a week-to-week basis. So the guys like Scotty Miller, Jalen Guyton, Travis Fulgham. I mean, there's enough of the. I mean, Jalen Reagor, who's coming back from injury. I mean, there's enough wide receivers and tight ends out there that you should be able to get by, at least at the wide receiver, tight end position. Where running back, obviously, that's much difficult. But now, at least looking at the Dallas offense as a whole, now they've become a much more condensed offense because we've seen where those targets are going. I mean, essentially, it's the pie has shrunk to. I think less than less than like 300 yards of total offense, like in the last 2 weeks, and really it's only gone to just a couple of people. It's been Amari Cooper and it's been Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, that's about it. Zeke when he's not fumbling the ball away, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
it's been bad.
It's hard to sell those guys because, again, like we talked earlier, what are you getting in return? And so unless you're happy with getting David Johnson in return, unless you're happy getting somebody like that in return, then sure. But I wouldn't be happy getting that. I'd rather ride it out with any of the guys that I can pick up off the waiver wire if I happen to have structured my team correctly or gotten or worked the waiver wire weeks in advance correctly, such that I could be able to weather that storm. But otherwise, no, I'm not trying to sell, or at least trade away any of those guys at this point.
I agree with you there, AJ. Anything to add, or want to move on to injuries?
No, let's rip through some injuries here.
All right, so I'll start here. You pick up the receivers, buddy. All right, so guys we know are out. OBJ, obviously done for the year. Real quick, Chris, what do you think about this helping Baker out? I kind of wonder how much the OBJ stress gets to him sometimes.
I don't know. I mean, when you have playmakers on your team like Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham, I mean, you can tell that they're guys that want to contribute to their team, and that's what they were at their respective positions. Like when Jarvis was in Miami, I mean, he was the focal point of that passing offense. When Odell was in New York, I mean, he was the focal point of that passing offense. And not to say that either of them were winners at that point, but I mean, for the longest time, I mean, Cleveland was still struggling to win, so they wanted to contribute. So I can understand their frustration. I mean, and obviously, I think they're much better than the guys that, I mean, Rashard Higgins and all that. I mean, great prospects and all, but again, I think it's more of where it's like what talent Baker has to connect with those guys, and we've seen them have their misfires over the last couple of seasons, and I mean, it's kind of manifested like over the last few weeks. Now, I'm happy that they've had their success, and but I don't know. It's hard for me to buy into the notion that without Odell Beckham, their team is going to be better. Because I think the team was already at least moving in a much more efficient manner because the play calling to me seemed much better. I mean, it really just came down to Baker being able to step up and perform better as a quarterback, which at times he just wasn't. It was more about can the rest of the offense and the defense make up for his mistakes. And I mean, I think for the most part that's true, and I think that's why they're in the position that they are.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. We got Chris Carson listed questionable midfoot sprain, probably more on the doubtful side, honestly. Carlos Hyde and Travis Homer are also banged up. So, I mean, DJ Dallas time, maybe.
He's the only one that practiced today.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. They're saying Hyde might try to tough it out, but I don't know how much I trust that. So, Deebo Samuel hamstring, likely he's out this week. He's also likely to miss week 9. Julian Edelman out, knee surgery. He's going to miss multiple weeks. He's, in my opinion, almost a drop candidate at this point. And then Gardner Minshew, the news dropped today, this morning, right? Dealing with multiple fractures and a strained ligament in his right thumb. I mean, this might explain a lot, guys. His availability, they're on bye this week, but his availability after the bye is seriously in question. So you got to keep an eye on that if you were banking on Gardner Minshew. Hopefully you weren't, because he's been pretty poor the last few weeks. Quarterbacks, Andy Dalton, questionable with a concussion, did not practice today. Running backs, we got Mark Ingram, questionable, knee, did not practice. Joe Mixon, questionable with that foot, did not practice. Philip Lindsay, questionable, concussion, did not practice. We got Josh Jacobs, questionable knee. He was limited. I think he'll probably be good to go, but, we've already talked about him. Dalvin Cook, questionable with a groin, likely on a pitch count because he's probable to play. Is pretty much what they're saying because they can't do probables anymore. But it sounds like he's going to be back. But if he is, he's on a pitch count. So I think I'm starting him. AJ, you agree with there? Like, you're starting Cook if he's in the lineup, right? I mean, he's that good.
Yeah, I think you have to at this point. I mean, there's just so many other injuries around it that it's unlikely that you have that much better talent on your team than what he can provide. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all right. So Damian Harris, questionable ankle, limited today. Miles Sanders, questionable knee, did not practice. My gut is that he's more on the doubtful side. So I don't think we're getting Sanders this week. Jeff Wilson got put on the IR with that high ankle sprain. We obviously know Mostert is out. We know Coleman's out. Chris, I got to ask you, if you had to pick one of these guys, Hasty or McKinnon?
Probably McKinnon, to be quite honest. While I do think that Hasty will probably get some of the earlier down work. I do think that McKinnon is going to be essentially the one that's going to be used in the pass catching hurry up type offense. So at least from a PPR standpoint, since we've already seen it happen, I do think that McKinnon's going to get the usage that we would want, while everybody is more or less rushing, if they haven't already. I mean, Hasty was the one that everybody was rushing to pick up this week.
I've got both on one team, and I'm flipping a coin.
I say that it's going to be Kyle Juszczyk getting 3 touchdowns.
That's probably what's going to happen because
I mean, McKinnon's been forgotten the last couple of weeks. It feels like it's like what the hell is happening? I never would have thought Jeff Wilson would pass Jared McKinnon in depth chart, but he did. So
he did, and I had him again, multiple teams, and dropped him in fishbowl. Was like, I don't need this guy. He's not doing me any favors. Picked up Gabriel Davis. Didn't even start him in his 2 points or whatever it was, and lost my matchup.
He had a touchdown called back too. Gabriel Davis did. That was so rough.
So
rough.
Even still, it wouldn't have mattered because I needed Wilson to play over James White. Yeah. Anyway, enough of my misery of Scott Fishbowl. John Brown, questionable with a knee. He did practice today.
Yep. 2 full practices.
Allen
Looking
Robinson is questionable with concussion. He did not practice. Keep an eye on him, obviously, as the games get closer on Sunday. AJ Green, questionable. He was limited, but doesn't appear to be injury related. Jarvis Landry, who we were just talking about with OBJ, he is questionable with hip and ribs. He was limited again. My guess is he's going to suit up, and tough it out. Tim Patrick, questionable with a hamstring, did not practice. We've got Brian Edwards, questionable foot and ankle. Seems to be like a weekly thing for this guy as well, but he was limited. Devontae Parker is questionable with a groin. He was limited. N'Keal Harry is questionable with concussion. Michael Thomas, questionable ankle, hamstring. He did return to practice today, though. Jameson Crowder, questionable with a groin. He was limited. And we've got Rager with the thumb. It sounds like he will play, but not sure exactly how much yet. So how much is this going to hurt Fulgham's value, though, if he suits up?
I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to hurt him a ton, because I still think that there's room for I think both of them to wind up playing both on the outside, because Travis Fulgham he played primarily. I think he played primarily as the X, but then also switched into the slot. I forget what his slot rate was over the past couple of weeks, but it's not like they have a ton of receivers to actually choose from. I mean, it's not like they're relying on Ortega-Whiteside or anybody like that, and they still are waiting on Dallas Goedert to return. So even if Jalen Reagor plays, I think there's still plenty of work for both of them to succeed in that offense. And of course, they're playing the Giants, so I think they'll be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we got Alshon questionable with calf, and then we've got Juju questionable with a knee injury. He did not practice. And then his teammate, Deontay Johnson, also questionable and did not practice with a toe injury. Moving on to finish it out here with the tight ends. Noah Fant was questionable with an ankle injury. He was limited. Robert Tonyan, also questionable with an ankle and knee injury, limited. And Tyler Higbee is questionable. Hand did not practice. I thought I might have seen that he will not play, but I could be wrong on that. So we'll just leave it at what it's at.
You might be right. I don't know. I type what I see.
I thought I saw his name come up on Fantasy Life a few hours ago. Nope. Just says he was limited participant in Thursday's practice. Okay.
All right, Chris, let's finish up this show. Week 8 picks. So we're going to do some sleepers and busts for the quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers. We'll start off here with quarterbacks. You'll go first. AJ will go second. I'll go third. Make your pick, give you a quick reason why, and we'll move through this. Sleepers. Any quarterback outside of the top 15 of the Fantasy Pros ECR?
So one of the guys that I actually that I wrote up this week, we talked a little bit about earlier. Baker Mayfield, I think, is in a pretty decent spot. But the guy that's going opposite him, like Derek Carr, I think is he's a boring pick because a lot of people just typically don't like starting Derek Carr. But I mean, if we look at their offense over the past few weeks, I mean, they legitimately beat Kansas City. Was that 42, 36, 42-38, like something like that. Deep ball passing rate is up this season. I believe
that's not his game.
Right. I mean,
it wasn't.
And it hasn't been just to. I mean, it's not just because of Henry Ruggs. I mean, it's been Nelson Aguilar too. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
alligator hands Aguilar.
Right?
I gotta call out the guy who did the touches and targets this week for the site. He talked about Aguilar and like the stats that he put in there. I was like, I didn't even realize it. I was like, holy crap! So it was amazing. So yeah, Aguilar's looking good, and yeah, I agree with the car thing. So, AJ, who you got?
Well, I will go with the other guy you mentioned there, Baker. I mean, he's coming off a huge game, and obviously we've already talked about OBJ being gone, but still got plenty of options there with Landry. You got Harrison Bryant stepping up. You still got Hunt. You got David Njoku. I just think that this is going to be a good game for him again. Hopefully, it's not a massive letdown game because of the huge game he just had. But I think he's solid option.
Yeah, mine's gonna be Jimmy G. I know, they're gonna be without Debo this week, and obviously most certainly that hurts, but that might just mean they have to pass a little more. Ayuk is really rounded into form. They still got Kittle, and let's be honest, guys, the Seattle pass defense is quite possibly one of the worst ever. It is so bad. I don't understand how they're just getting gashed. So Jimmy G, of all quarterbacks, who's ranked really low, I think he could borderline be a QB1 this week. I think he can move all the way up there. So running back, Chris, anybody outside the top, stupid scroll bar moved, outside of the top 24. Thank you.
Let's see. Outside of the top 24?
Yeah.
I think the first person that probably comes to mind, at least for me, it might be so Devin Singletary sticks out. And that's just because, New England's defense, for as great as it's been, primarily, but we just saw them, completely get run over by Jeff Wilson and San Francisco. So while it might be something of a long shot, especially with Zach Moss back, I think either one of those running backs could have at least a decent game against the Patriots. Now, especially look at, since weather is kind of my thing, that game is expected to have, I think, 20 to 21 mile per hour winds, and it's supposed to be slightly rainy throughout the game as well. So if you want to lean on, the old narratives of needing to, they probably run the ball a bit more. I do think it's possible, at the very least, for him to bang in a couple touchdowns to have a decent game.
All right. I like it. I'm going to stick with that game there. I'm going to go on the other side of the ball, though, and I'm going to go with James White. He was completely non-existent last week. Like I said, I think he got me 0.8 points in Scott Fish. So thanks for that.
Offense was non-existent last week.
Yeah, they were just horrendous.
Cam had negative points in a standard league. Just to let you know that.
Wow. Okay. I just can't see White disappearing completely again. He's a talented back. He knows this offense, too well for him to just be gone like that. So, that'll be interesting. We just got the call from Jeff that PJ Walker is now in the game for Carolina and almost bombed himself a touchdown. Close.
Good, man.
All right. So what you got, Joe?
Mine's gonna be Malcolm Brown. Akers being completely ruled out of this offense, it seems like, it's letting this 1-2 punch roll free. So I'm liking Malcolm Brown, even if he's the RB2 in this offense, it's still capable of putting up pretty good numbers. So I like him being able to finish as a true RB2. Wide receiver, Chris, anybody outside of the top 36? Go.
Outside of the top 36? Well, we already talked about Gabriel Davis earlier, so I can't really mention him. I would say that Marquez Callaway for the Saints, even with Michael Thomas coming back, he was able to show out quite well this past week, and we don't know if Emmanuel Sanders is going to be activated off of the reserve COVID list. So while I know that we've been all hoping that Traquan Smith would actually become a thing, it's not seeming like that's going to be the case. So with his decent target share back in week 7, I think that Marquez Callaway might be somebody that if you stashed him last week, he'd at least be somebody that you can keep this week. Despite the fact that They're playing against Chicago, who I'm pretty sure has only allowed one 100-yard receiving game so far this season.
Chicago's tough, dude.
Yeah.
All right. AJ.
All right, receiver. I'm going with Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Look, he had his best game of the season in Week 1 against Minnesota. So I think he goes off again this week. Devontae is obviously going to get his. He's coming off a monster week, probably because we gave his jersey away. Congrats again to our winner, Dave. I hope you received it by now. I have not checked the tracking. So you were supposed to get it yesterday. Thanks again for listening. But yeah, Valdez-Scantling, huge game against them in Week 1. I think he comes back from going 0 for on 4 targets last week.
All right, mine's going to be Higgins, no OBJ. Baker's able to spread the ball around a little more, and so I like Higgins' chances to be able to make some noise here. I mean, I think we all know that this guy's talented. He just needs the opportunity. All right, quarterbacks bust. Anybody inside the top 12, Chris?
I would say easily Josh Allen.
Yep.
I mean, and I'm not a Josh Allen hater. Not at all. I mean, I was definitely Oh yeah, I know. I already had it out with him. I mean,
yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. I mean, coming into this season, I was definitely proved wrong in terms of what he's capable of doing. But especially with not just the rushing, that actually hasn't been like a huge part of the game. He's actually been a fairly efficient passer. But for the past couple of weeks, I mean, he's down to I think he's passed at minus 6.5% completion percentage over expected, down to minus 0.1 EPA per play. I think a lot of his efficiency metrics that we saw, which were almost the complete reverse. I mean, I think he was at either the third or fourth highest efficient quarterback in the league through the first month of the season. I mean, all of that. I mean, because he was in the MVP conversation for the first month, but we just haven't seen it. And so, I mean, now this weekend going against New England, I'm not sold on him being the best bet for quarterback 1 performance. So if there's anybody that I could see just falling out of that, top 12 QB range this week, it'd probably be him.
Oh, that was mine. So, and you just said pretty much everything I was going to say. So, AJ.
All right, I will finish the QBs out then with Mr. Lamar Jackson. Look, this is always a tough matchup. In general, it's just a drag down, smackdown, high school rivalry type game every time. It's always not always fairly low scoring, but most of the time it's fairly low scoring. It's decided by a field goal or less. I mean, it's going to be a crazy game for first place. And you actually have both of these coaches that I just saw earlier making history as the first tandem to face off against each other for 25 times in the Super Bowl era. That's John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin. So kudos to them for getting that record. And this is only the first matchup of the season, but big game, a lot on the line. I just not loving Lamar this week.
All right, Chris. Running back inside the top 20 for your bust.
Running back inside the top 20. I mean, is Ezekiel Elliott okay? Should we not put?
You just took mine again. That's fine. Go ahead.
Can we not do that? I mean, that's an easy one though, right? I would say
that's what I did last week. So,
I mean, if there's going to be another one though, I would say maybe the case for CEH falling out out because of the Le'Veon Bell touch share, not getting his. If he doesn't get a touchdown, I can see him not getting there on just yardage. Yep. I don't always subscribe to the revenge game narrative, But I mean, it is Le'Veon Bell playing against his former team. So if I can at least have to give myself some leeway to the idea that if they're up quite a bit, like by the third quarter or whatever, which is likely, they just let Le'Veon Bell, exact whatever revenge that he wants on that team for, the rest of the game. I can see that being a possible thing that happens in that game. So for where he's ranked right now, I could see Clyde Edwards-Helaire kind of falling out of, just based off of who they're playing this weekend.
Yeah, no, that was actually my second one, but that's fine. AJ, what you got?
All right. So speaking of revenge games, it looks like Pittsburgh will not be playing Kansas City unless they make it to face off in the playoffs, which would likely be in the AFC Championship game. So we'll buy into that narrative later for the playoffs for Bell. But right now, I am going with Gaskins. I mean, I just don't love this matchup against LA and Aaron Donald. I mean, it's just not a good setup for him. Plus, you got Tua making his first start. I just think LA is going to be through the offensive line of Miami on every play. So Gaskins is just not going to have a lot of room to work with, unfortunately. I mean, he's been good. He's like a very nice surprise waiver wire pickup from this year, but just don't like him this week. So, Joe, you have anybody, or are we moving to receiver?
I mean, mine was Zeke. I mean, it's like I said, it's the most obvious pick, as Chris said. I mean, the situation is just terrible. The offensive line's atrocious. It's Zach Martin coming back. I'm not sure it's going to matter. So, Chris, any receivers inside the top 24?
Receivers inside the top 24. I mean, Devontae. No, I'm not gonna say Devontae Adams. No. I can't do that. I would say though, with the way that their offense has fluctuated on a week-to-week basis, after it's not. There's no analytical process to this at all. But after Tyler Lockett went off last week, is this going to be DK Metcalf's week? I mean, is it? I mean, are they just going to flip flop?
Nope.
I mean, that's the only thing that I wonder about. I mean, I can still project both of them for a similar target share. It's just going to be that with the deep ball efficiency from Russell Wilson, instead of it being the deep shot to Tyler Lockett, it'll just be the deep shot to DK Metcalf, and then we're just kind of left. Because really the volume isn't always going to be there to sustain both of them on like a week-to-week basis.
Although without the running game this week, maybe it will be.
It's possible. It's definitely possible.
Right?
So,
they might not have anything else to go on. We don't know what DJ Dallas really is. So, AJ, that was yours.
That was mine. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that it's David Moore season.
There we go.
Good luck. All right. Mine's going to be Adam Thielen. And just 2 words. Jair Alexander. Good luck, bro.
I was on the fence about Thielen. I was thinking of picking him, and then I saw you had him. But I mean, he put up 110 on Green Bay week 1. So I don't know if I see it happen again.
They were down like 3 touchdowns. That was
probably.
So, all right. Tight ends to stream, Chris. Anybody? We use the Yahoo ownership percentages for everybody who's listening. Anybody owned 50% or less?
50% or less?
It's pretty brutal.
Yeah, I know that is digging deep.
I might have to go. I've been increasing it slowly over the.
I mean, Dick Rod for sure.
Mine? That's fine.
I mean, could I interest you guys in Drew Sample?
I mean, I tried that once or twice this year. I'll tell you how that worked out.
All right, I will. I'll read mine, and then I will state who my second runner up was. Ebron is mine. I know I talked about Lamar being down, this being the type of game that it is, though. And Baltimore is going to be focusing on these receivers, They've got a decent enough secondary that I think they're just gonna stay on receivers, and they have great linebackers too. So I'm sure there'll be plenty good cover in the middle of the field. But I'm calling Ebron for 5 catches, 61 yards, and a score. I mean, he's been good in 4 of his last 5 games. Between 40, 43, and then like 52 yards or something like that. So, I mean, he's getting his share. He only has 1 score, but I think he gets in the end zone again this week. My second place was going to be Anthony Fursker, or whatever the hell his name is, for Tennessee.
Art Daddy.
Yes.
Jonathan Smith's going to play. Move on. All right. Rich Rod was mine. I guess Dick Rod. That's what we're calling him.
It's
no Ertz.
Yeah,
no,
Dick Rod.
I know. Hello. No Ertz, no Goddard. Going against the Cowboys. Fired up, guys. So, defense. Chris, anybody 50% or less owned in Yahoo?
Defenses for this week. I mean, if you're going to try and pick up a streaming defense, Titans aren't too terrible. I mean, just given the sacks and fumbles that Cincinnati's given up over the past few weeks, they're not the best at generating pressure. I want to say they're average, slightly above average. Secondary's not great, but at least, I mean, Joe Burrow, for as many dropbacks, I think he's like second or third in dropbacks in the league. I mean, there's at least a chance for them to pick up at least a couple of sacks, and then some turnovers might come their way. So it's worth a shot, at least.
Yeah. AJ, you got one?
Yeah. I did like Tennessee. I had that queued up and then forgot to just actually type it. But I'm going to go with Cleveland. Yeah, they got torched last week by Cincy. It's possible that, we've already talked about Derek Carr, torching again. Boring, but could put some numbers up on him. But I think Cleveland's
streaming defenses, you don't always care about the points against. You care about sacks and turnovers, so it could work.
Exactly. And so Derek Carr is not as mobile as he once was. And out of the 2 games that Cleveland's had at home, 2 good scoring games defensive wise against Washington and Indy. The 3rd game was against Cincy. So yeah, I like Cleveland.
All right. Real quick before I do mine. Jack Goff on YouTube asks us flex option: John Brown, Renfro, Aguilar, Joshua Smith, or Adrian Peterson. Chris, who you got?
I'd probably say John Brown out of all of that, to be quite honest.
Yeah, if he plays right, he's a play, I think, right? So he should be good. So AJ,
who was it?
John Brown, Renfro, Aguilar, Joshua Smith. I think that's supposed to be Jonnu Smith, I'm guessing. I don't know. Or Adrian Peterson. I don't know who Joshua Smith. Anybody know who Josh Smith is?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Maybe Jeff Smith from the Jets. That's a pass. It's not happening.
I mean, I kind of like Renfro, actually.
Maybe.
I think he could.
I'm going John Brown. I think John Brown's the guy, even though I'm not loving that. We're all kind of down on Allen, but not down enough where the receivers are going to suffer, I think. So, all right, my defense and things here is Green Bay. I mean, look, this game was a huge shootout last time, but it ended up not. It wasn't really a shootout. It ended up being Green Bay got up huge, played prevent the rest of the game, and then Kirk went off in the second half. So it was weird. I think Kirk is susceptible as in Washington fan, whatever you want to call him. He's sacks and turnovers, and he's still doing the same thing he did here in Minnesota, or he's doing in Minnesota. So I think Green Bay can just eat them up and learn from their mistakes from the first game and take this one over. So, all right, Chris, that's all we've got for the show. Want to give you the chance to kind of sign out and let everybody know where they can find your work and find you on Twitter and stuff like that.
You can find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX. My work is over at, you can find me at 4for4, Number Fire, Football Guys, and Roto World throughout the week. So you'll see me posting my columns as they get published. I'll have another column out for on Number Fire and Roto World tomorrow morning. One
Cool.
being the weather report, because we've got like 5 or 6 games that should have just like some pretty bad playing conditions on Sunday and into I think Monday night's game as well, maybe. But either way, so check those out, and if you have any questions, just come hit me up on Twitter.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you coming back on, and always a pleasure chatting
Anytime.
with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool, man. Yeah, absolutely. Great information. Guys, I know it was a longer show, but Chris drops the knowledge, man. So it's all worth it. So, all right, that's all I've got. Good luck to everybody in week 8. Hit us up on Twitter, and catch you all next week.